Hi, welcome to PH Insights presented by the Pulmonary Hypertension Association. Join us as we delve into patient stories, healthcare updates, and the latest insights on pulmonary hypertension. Thank you to our platform sponsor, J&J, for their unrestricted support of PH Insights. Sponsors do not endorse or participate in the development of program content.
Hi, everyone. This is Jaeger Spratt, PHA's Advocacy and Treatment Access Program Manager. I am guest hosting today, and here with me I have Colleen Connor and Amy Burant. I'll let each of them introduce themselves. Colleen, if you would like to start.
Sure. Hi, this is Colleen, and thank you for having us on this call today, Jaeger. Looking forward
Absolutely.
to the discussion.
And I'm Amy Burant, coming to you from Denver. Thanks again for including us, Jaeger.
Absolutely. Thank you both for joining. I'm really excited to talk today about oxygen in general and about the Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform Act in particular. You both have been really fantastic advocates, both with PHA and with other organizations. So thrilled that we get to talk about some of the really cool stuff that you both have done. I do want to start us off with grounding ourselves in the patient experience and all of the expertise that you both bring as having those lived experiences with pulmonary hypertension, and then specifically how that pulmonary hypertension journey has involved your use of supplemental oxygen and how that has progressed over time. So Amy, I don't know if maybe we can start with you, and then Colleen will have you share your story after that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I was diagnosed with pulmonary arterial hypertension in April of 2013. And so while not everybody with pulmonary hypertension uses oxygen, I do. So when I was diagnosed, I was initially put on 3 to 4 liters of oxygen. And over the next couple of years, it accelerated and my condition worsened. And so I went from 3 to 4 liters of oxygen to 8 to 10 liters of oxygen. And ultimately, when I'm exercising, I use 15 liters plus. And just with normal activity, like say walking from the car to the grocery store, I use about 10. And so when I'm at rest, I'm around 4, which is a respectable level for someone with pulmonary hypertension, but it really spikes with exercise. So as my needs increased, I had to be transitioned over to liquid oxygen. And that was tricky because I had to admit that my lung condition was worsening. When I was switched over to liquid, it actually was kind of a blessing in disguise because I no longer was limited by my access to electricity. And so for the first time in 3 years, we were able to go camping again. So took my liquid oxygen up into the mountains in Colorado and were able to camp next to a lake and go kayaking and fishing and all the things, hiking, and never had to worry about having enough oxygen because not only did I have the high flow that I needed, I was not limited by access to electricity. So again, it was hard to admit that my lung condition was getting worse, but it was actually really liberating. And that has only continued the benefit of being on liquid oxygen versus having to use either e-cylinders or be harnessed to an electric source. POCs are not an option for me because my flow is so high. So liquid oxygen really is the only best option for me and how I like to live my life. We're very active so that I can do just the normal day-to-day stuff like running my kid around to her activities, taking her to the farm, going to the grocery store. And I'm not limited in what my oxygen supply can do. So I'm super grateful for that. And that's kind of my story, but I realize that it's not everybody's story. And so I think it's been great to meet Colleen and kind of have some perspective and really help me to be grateful for the situation that I'm in right now, recognizing that it may not always be like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point that you raise, Amy. Just realizing that for so many folks in the US, that your story is actually pretty rare these days. And, unfortunately that certainly didn't used to be the case. Liquid oxygen had been available a lot more widely, but it's sort of gradually over the years become less available. as I talked about with the guest Susan Jacobs in the previous podcast that came out yesterday, that really has come down to Medicare's competitive bidding process. And so gradually just cutting off the types of services because they're not being reimbursed adequately. And Colleen, I know you have been on oxygen for quite a few years. So you've really seen that progression happen in real time and unfortunately have really bared the brunt of that change personally. So if you want to share us a little bit about that.
Sure, Jaeger. Thanks. Up until 2004, I had a really active full life and career. And I too, like Amy, was very active. I enjoyed sports. I liked to bike. I was able to ski. I traveled frequently for work. My life was full and it was fast. But after the birth of my second child, I became short of breath during activities. And for any physicians listening, you know the story. I looked healthy, so it took years to get the right diagnosis. And then in 2007, when my children were 3 and 7 years old, I was diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary hypertension. And one of my prescriptions was 24/7 supplemental oxygen. And that was over 17 years ago. And, I thought it was difficult to deal with the devastating implications of my cardiopulmonary disease and try to raise my family all along. And that was before the access to the oxygen equipment that I need was taken away from me. So when I did have the appropriate equipment, I could hold my children's hands and not just my oxygen tank. I used to be able to do more for both my family and, frankly, for society. I want to share some experiences that I feel are common to make sure that those listening understand. When you are in your 30s, and I venture to guess at any age, and needing to wear supplemental oxygen, it's a character building experience, especially when you're dealing with the fallout of a new diagnosis. And while people couldn't see the IV line in my chest for 12 years, needing supplemental oxygen is certainly wearing an illness on your sleeve. And early on, even dear friends would say things to me like, yeah, but you're really not going to wear that when we go outside, right? And wearing oxygen isn't just a medical need. It's a public declaration of illness. But thanks to the services of a respiratory therapist who came into my home, I learned how to actually use the equipment safely and the critical importance of compliance. And they recommended at the time that I switch over to liquid oxygen for outside the home. Again, to free up my hands to hold my young children's hands instead of fussing with a large tank and cart. They educated me on how to cook safely, travel safely with all the equipment in my car, and other critical factors to prevent catastrophes. And that service is no longer covered for patients and families who are left with equipment dropped off at the door to figure it out on their own. And then on top of that, several years ago, my liquid oxygen system was just taken away from me. I had a manageable 5-pound backpack with a liquid container that enabled me to go bike riding with my kids on 6 liters a minute and to wade in ankle-deep ocean water and to stay close to my kids and enjoy experiences with them. And now I'm forced to drag a 15-pound tank/cart combination. Try taking that with you on a walk on the beach or in the grass or to the grocery store. And I know I can't. And when you need several oxygen tanks to leave the house, it's resulted in me losing my independence. And on top of that, there's another cruel twist that I'm actually forced to ration the tanks. I can only leave my house on average 14 hours a week, Jaeger. And here's how that plays out in real life. Last month, I attended a 2-day board meeting, and I used 1/3 of my monthly allocation in those 2 days. For the rest of the month, I couldn't go visit my mom. I couldn't go outside for a walk. I couldn't meet my friends for dinner. And tragically, I couldn't help go bring my daughter home from college. That's now my reality. And it's just heartbreaking to know that it's a policy choice that has changed, not a medical one. And I also want to mention that this affects patients of all ages. I've spoken to families who struggle to get their own children the oxygen equipment that they need for school and outside activities. I talked to the mom of Lily. Lily's 9, and all 65 pounds of her are being forced to use tanks that are too big for her frame. And she's also not given enough tanks to do the sorts of things that she wants to do outside the house with her friends. I feel as though our illnesses already make the life that we're living on the sidelines extraordinarily difficult to manage. And the system is now forcing many of us to languish in further suffering and isolation. And it didn't used to be this way. I used to have what I needed and as much oxygen as I needed. But for now, policy has forced me and others into home confinement. And even worse, I understand that there are innumerable accounts of patients with delayed discharges from hospitals or actually hoteling, living in the hospital because of the liquid oxygen systems, especially for those needing higher flow, that used to be available are now largely non-existent due to a lack of reimbursement. And this comes at a tremendous financial and human cost.
That's such a good point, Colleen. This policy really has gotten to the point where there's, serious financial issues that truly are benefiting no one. And the durable medical equipment process with Medicare has definitely overall saved money. Like that, objectively, we can see that having the bidding process in place has helped. However, the section of oxygen being included with other durable medical equipment really, I feel, is just an oversight. And unfortunately, that oversight has carried on for more than a decade and has really had such severe quality of life and I believe also most likely length of life impacts for a lot of patients with lung disease. So it's really frustrating to see that level of not quite fully seeing those unintended consequences. When competitive bidding was first put in place in the early 2010s, has now fallen out into scenario that we find the supplemental oxygen market in today, where liquid oxygen is only very rarely available in just a select few parts of the US. And even for people who have managed to cling on to it, it's not easy. And Amy, I know you've told me in the past of having to fight to keep your liquid oxygen. If you want to tell us a little bit about that too.
Yeah. So in about, I guess it was 2 years ago in October, I got a text message. I'd heard kind of these rumblings about, I live in Denver. And so we have a lot of, at altitude, we have a lot more higher flow patients, I think, than probably most other areas in the country. And so I think that's why we've been somewhat insulated from the withdrawal of the liquid systems. So for me personally, I got a text from my oxygen delivery driver that said, "Hey, Amy, just wanted to give you the heads up. We're shedding our liquid oxygen division and they're reclaiming all of that equipment. And I'm not sure that you're going to be involved, but I just wanted to give you the heads up." And so for me as a high flow patient, the only other option is the green tanks. And what Colleen's talking about, having your hands free with young children, it was invaluable for me. Just try to carry like a 5-pound weight in your hand at all times and try to do your things. And so then add that to where you have cardiopulmonary disease that makes lifting things difficult, that makes energy conservation is super important. And now you're trying to lug around tanks or lift them into your car or thread the tubing around the car. I mean, it's just the logistics is really overwhelming. So anyway, after I got that text, I just sort of spent a week as I was making phone calls and trying to figure out, is this actually going to affect me or is it not? I spent a week thinking about how my life was just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I think there's just this misconception that I have a cardiac and lung disease and I'm just going to sit at home until I die. Well, that's not how I live my life. And that's not how anyone wants to live their life. And so sometimes these oxygen companies will just bring you the equipment and then dump it on your doorstep and then peace out, figure it out. And that equipment, while you're grateful to have it, because it does keep you alive and does keep you as healthy as you can be when you're in your home, it does not serve you living a great big life outside of your home. And people need lives outside of their home to stay engaged with their community, to find the things that are meaningful to them. Like, it isn't just about staying at home until you die. Like, that is a misconception. And so I just really think like we can do such a better job. And I think, Colleen, you speaking to the physicians that are listening to this is really important. Like, find out what's important to your patients. Ask, how do you want to live your life? Where do you need to be on a daily basis? And then figure out a way to help meet their needs. Like, your patients are resilient and they're resourceful, but there's a system in place right now where it doesn't matter how smart or resourceful you are, there are just some hard stops. And I'm super grateful to be living in Denver where those hard stops have not been insurmountable. And so I can't imagine, and my heart goes out to people that have lost access to liquid oxygen, because it would literally change my life in a very, very negative way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so frustrating too that it's become such a fight and often a losing battle in order to get liquid oxygen, because that's really not the case in other countries. And I've been talking with other organizations that are part of the Oxygen Coalition that's trying to get the SOAR Act passed, and European contingents that share their information with us about pulmonary hypertension and other lung diseases. The default oxygen method is liquid oxygen. So it's not like it's difficult to get this in theory. It's definitely an added cost, but it's a worthwhile one. And I think especially like Colleen bringing up the hoteling in hospitals, that's a huge cost. And certainly it is greater than what would be the cost to deliver liquid oxygen to the home. And not only would that be more cost effective for patients who are having to be kept in hospital, it would likely also give them a better outcome, particularly for folks who are like sitting in hospital waiting to be able to receive a transplant. It's really important to keep up your body's conditioning to be able to recover from such an intensive surgery. So yeah, I believe in the previous episode, we have already talked about kind of what the Supplemental Oxygen Access Reform Act would do. And I know Colleen and Amy are certainly very familiar with that bill, as they have both been to Capitol Hill multiple times to advocate for it. So I just wanted to give each of you a couple minutes to spotlight what you've done so far and just highlight the importance of this bill and why you guys are so passionate about it. So Amy, we'll go ahead and start with you.
I had done some kind of remote virtual advocacy with Jaeger before about the Copays Act and the Safe Step Act and things like that. And I was always kind of like, hey, let me know when the Oxygen Act comes up, because like I'm all in for that one. And so it was a really easy thing and, to get involved in it. But it still sort of seems so absurd to me that I know nothing about writing law or being a part of that, or never imagined that I would be on Capitol Hill meeting with my legislators. And so it's been really, really cool. Like, it made me feel very patriotic to be part of this system, and just really proud that I could go to DC and meet with these offices and put a face on an issue that is really, really critical. And I'm super grateful that I feel healthy enough to do that, and that PHA gave me a platform to do that, because I realize that when you feel well enough to do things like that, like, I feel like there's a responsibility to do it. And I'm also super grateful for the opportunity, because being able to be that face, I think some people don't know anybody on oxygen. And again, they have this preconceived notion about what that person looks like. It's a person who is just sedentary, sitting in their home, strapped to the wall, waiting to die. And I'm here to tell you that that is absolutely not how most of us on oxygen live. I mean, we want to be out in the world living our lives, and we happen to have this extra accessory. And then I realized that I was there in somewhat selfish capacity because I had seen people lose their access to liquid oxygen, and I did not want to be counted among those numbers. And so I'm super grateful that it hasn't happened, but I have no faith whatsoever that it will not eventually come for me if the SOAR Act doesn't pass. And so that's why I'll tell my story as often as I need to, because I want to help my community, but I also want to help myself. So, yeah, thank you again, Jaeger, for that chance to tell it again.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I just also wanted to share how proud I am of both of you. But yeah, Amy, you as an advocate, starting out also with the American Lung Association and having them get you up onto Capitol Hill a couple of times last year for the previous congressional sessions iteration of the SOAR Act. And then it was just especially nice that we were able to bring for PHA's Hill Day, not only you, but also to invite your daughter to come with you. So I don't know if you want to say a couple words about that
Yeah,
experience too.
that was great. I have a 15-year-old daughter, so that's the 3-year-old when I was diagnosed that I needed my hands to help care for, but she's now 15 and I don't ask her a lot specifically to be a caregiver for me. My husband is super involved, and you don't ever want your kid to have to take care of you. That was one of those things that was really hard to wrap my head around. And obviously, she does that informally. Man, I was so grateful that she was able to come, Jaeger. I mean, what a great opportunity for her to be able to sit in those meetings and learn about the process of advocating for an act that is important and something that was so personal for us. She didn't have a lot to say because I think she was a little nervous about that and didn't really feel like her voice was valuable, which is totally not right because my oxygen use absolutely affects her life. But to be able to sit in there, and the thing that was really cool about this last trip was my first trip when we went, we met with all the offices and everybody was very polite. And, they're like, oh, yes, this is a very important issue. I'm going to take it back to my member and discuss it with them. And I was like, come on, man, just sign on. What's the problem? And it was really fun because this time we met with an office and the member burst in fresh from a floor vote. And he was like, how can I help you? What can I do? And he was like, yes, I'll sign on as a co-sponsor. And I was like, did that just happen? And so I was really excited that she could see the effort and then directly immediate gratification from that. So that was really fun.
Yeah, that was an especially special moment there for sure. It's pretty rare, I think, to be able to get that quick of a turnaround, although I certainly wish that it was more common. But yeah, definitely a shout out to Representative Fields from Louisiana. We very much appreciate his support and appreciate him meeting with the PHA advocates. Absolutely. But yeah, Colleen, you have been, I would say, a superstar advocate for quite a long time with other issues as well, but definitely you have really taken the SOAR Act under your wing as your special passion project. So I just wanted to give you a couple moments to talk about the various things you've done.
Sure. So I, like Amy, need a higher flow of oxygen. So I sit around 4 to 6, but then to walk, I need, 10 to 15. So it's critically important to me that patients that are in my situation and patients that are hoteling and children, that we get the type of oxygen that we need and that we're not restricted in the amount and under kind of house arrest. So I've been all in, and PHA has really, guided me and taught me how to advocate and brought me also to visit the Hill to discuss some of the same policy items that impact patients that Amy was referring to. And then last year, when I heard that the SOAR Act was being drafted, I was encouraged to reach out to my own U.S. representative staff, and I did that a few times on Zoom. First time I asked for a meeting to tell my U.S. rep staff that we have a big issue that we need help with and what I was going through personally, and that I'm restricted from leaving my home, and so were other patients. And I followed up again months later with the same person to let them know that legislation was being drafted. And then once it was available, I followed up a third time. And with the same person, and I was building this relationship. So when they joined the call, they had already read the bill text. And much like your and Amy's experience in DC, the first thing she said is, Colleen, we are going to co-sponsor. This absolutely makes sense. Now, I almost fell off my chair. I was exuberant. But it turns out that persistence and maybe a little charm, right? It works. And in the last few weeks, I've joined a call with my own care team at the University of Pennsylvania Pulmonary Vascular Disease Program, and my fellow patients joined, and we were on with a legislative aid for one of the U.S. senators for Pennsylvania to request SOAR Act co-sponsorship. And they are very interested. And I also joined a pulmonary hypertension team with Cincinnati Children's Hospital and their patient families, with their local U.S. congressman staff. And I have to tell you that in all of these Zoom meetings, it's abundantly clear that the congressional offices are really emphatic that the combination of patient stories with medical experts discussing their struggles to support patients is critically important. And it is helping their offices inform their offices on what they should be working on. So, I just want to mention you physicians have the power, you have the credibility, and you have the platform to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. You're the megaphone for the weakened, the patients whose very breathing consumes all their energy, and the isolated, those who never could possibly travel to Washington, and the uninformed. There are so many patients who have no idea how any of this policy stuff works, and why would they? My guess is that, because I've been on oxygen for almost 18 years, people like myself are maybe in a minority of patients who understand that securing access to supplemental oxygen didn't used to work this way, and it doesn't need to work this way.
No, I think that's such a great point, Colleen, that it's really comes down to a matter of awareness, and it can be really challenging on Capitol Hill to actually capture people's attention. And it does sometimes take more than one visit. And I think that's really why it's so important to have such a large community. And I think that is one of the major strengths that we do have with the SOAR Act, because we have a very large coalition. And this bill was drafted in collaboration with a lot of different stakeholders involving not just physicians, but like respiratory therapists as well, and involving patients and even oxygen suppliers. So, and I think having all of those different people who were involved in the drafting of it, we really need to see everybody equally pulling their weight to get it passed as well, and reaching out to the representatives to ask for that support. Congress is very busy and very preoccupied, especially right now. This has been a very hectic, very fraught politically congressional session. There's a lot of stuff that is a little bit out of order, unusual, but that doesn't mean that we stop trying. That means that we try harder, that we have to keep pushing. And, if we have a large enough volume of people, and if we have enough people reaching out multiple times and really forcing folks to listen and hear us and to come back and check up on that meeting. Hey, how's it going? Have you been able to bring this up with your boss yet? Are you guys considering co-sponsoring yet? Those follow-ups, and like you said, Colleen, really building that relationship, they go a long ways. That's how PHA goes from knowing someone in an office to having that office become a congressional champion of pulmonary hypertension. And if they've taken the time to listen and get to know pulmonary hypertension patients on an issue like oxygen, that can make them more likely to support us on other important issues too. So it's not sort of a one and done thing. This is a very, iterative, time after time building process. But yeah, I think, Colleen, you make an excellent point that especially the combination of both physicians or nurses, respiratory therapists, any healthcare professional who's working with patients alongside the patients that they are treating has just an immensely powerful story that combination really does make offices sit up and take notice.
Yeah. And Jaeger, I just want to do a little call to action. So I feel as though in the last Congress, we didn't come anywhere close to the traction that I was hoping that we would be receiving for the SOAR Act. And the updated bill, as I'm sure you already talked about with Susan, was dropped into the 119th Congress in mid-April. And we do have over 30 nonprofits and medical societies who are signed on to this. And I just want to say to physicians, please think of us. We need your voice and your leadership on these issues. And I want you to think of the advocacy like building any meaningful relationship, right? If it's going to ask someone out for a date or create a business partnership or a friendship, you wouldn't propose marriage via a form letter. Although I'm sure someone's tried. Advocacy is not a blind date. It's about real connection. And when you're serious about someone, you just don't send a generic text and hope for the best. You learn their name and what matters to them, and you show up consistently, and you have real conversations because you genuinely care. And the same exact principle applies to the SOAR Act. And as a patient, I feel as though the form letters are great, but also like a mass of Valentine's Day cards, right? They might get noticed, but they might not make lasting change. But we would like you to start wherever you can. Send the form letter if that's all you have time for, because we do absolutely need volume. But understand that each letter is a tally mark. It's not a relationship. If you can take 5 minutes, please call your legislators. Write down who you spoke with and follow up with them, or write the letter to the editor. In August recess, the legislators are going to be in their own districts. It's a perfect opportunity to schedule either an in-person meeting or make a comment at one of the local town halls about the importance of access to supplemental oxygen. And we can help you with these. Jaeger and all the nonprofits have the phone scripts, the templates, the background information to support you. And my challenge is that you truly partner with us. You know, your voice completes the circle of care. I hope quality care doesn't end with writing the oxygen prescription. I hope that everyone will consider partnering at the level where you make it a personal goal to schedule a virtual meeting with the legislators covering both your care center location and where you live. And we can help you with the meeting requests, suggested agenda, but the request to co-sponsor must come from you, the constituents, to your legislators. And when you start following up with the people that you've met in the office, and you are building a genuine relationship and around shared goals, and that's how the policy is going to move forward. And don't do it alone. Ask your practice partners, your colleagues, your patients, and the nonprofits who are most aligned that are supporting this to join you. And I want you to just also remember, as a physician, when you speak to Congress about the SOAR Act, you represent hundreds of patients whose quality of life is depending on this proper access to oxygen. And your voice is amplifying thousands of silent struggles that are happening behind closed doors for the people that are the forgotten. Please use that in your conversations. And one final thing I just want to say is that in my experience, once physicians truly understand what is happening with oxygen access and the path to fix it, I found that you have been the most engaged and supportive allies we could ever hope for. So I just want to thank you in advance for lending your experience and your voice and your compassion to this cause for all of us. And together, I hope that we can make the difference for the most vulnerable of patients who need your help the most.
Awesome. Thank you, Colleen. I just can't underscore enough everything that you just said. It's super important for people to get involved with advocacy, and I am more than happy to help folks and, meet everyone exactly where they are. I know that advocacy can be really intimidating and just overwhelming, confusing. So I am so happy to hop on the phone and have a chat with somebody, text with folks if you're not a phone call person, just do emails. There's really any number of ways to get started. And it really can be something as truly simple as just sending a form letter. And even within those form letters, we do have a box where you can customize your message. You can write how oxygen is affecting you personally or affecting your patients personally in whatever way that you're connected to it. So even just that one first step of like, I'm going to write a couple sentences about oxygen, that helps your form letter stand out more and not get counted as like just a tally mark. It is a unique letter in that case. And then the next step after that, just picking up the phone and calling. You can absolutely use our call scripts. We're more than happy to coach you through that. We have a whole PowerPoint presentation that'll walk you through all the steps. It can be a very simple, quick process, but those phone calls really do turn up the heat on your legislators' offices and lets them know that people are really paying attention to this. And then even beyond that, writing letters to the editor, writing opinion pieces, reaching out to have an in-person or a virtual meeting, all of those things, as you build yourself up to it, are super valuable as well and can go towards building that kind of ongoing congressional relationship. So in our show notes, we have a lot of links available to get you connected. You can go onto PHA's Advocacy Action Center and find those pre-written letters. And those also are where you would find the call scripts as well. And then please feel free to reach out to me. Both my phone number and email are going to be in that show notes as well, I believe. So any means that you have, we will absolutely take. As much time or as little time as you have is still going to be valuable. And I think if we can raise up enough voices with enough breath together, hopefully we really can get the SOAR Act to soar across the finish line. So thank you, Amy, and thank you, Colleen, for lending your voices today and sharing your experiences with our listeners. Appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to PH Insights presented by the Pulmonary Hypertension Association. Remember to subscribe and to join us every second and fourth Wednesday of the month for more valuable insights. And thank you to J&J for their unrestricted